Okay, so on keeping on startups a little bit, you've done what a lot of startup founders, including myself, would love to do, and you've scaled. You've been part of teams where you've grown stuff from very early stages to massive businesses. Dare I say, I hate the word unicorn, but maybe a horse with a pointy strap on its head or something like that, right? But
that's a really weird thing to visualize. But yeah, okay.
But you've been there, you've done that, you've won that T-shirt. A lot of people go on that journey, and I don't know what the percentages are, but I mean the vast majority of startups just die pretty quickly, and then so many don't make it after a year, 5 years, etc., etc. So, what advice would you give, I suppose, to entrepreneurs? And I am fishing a little bit for myself here, but to people that are trying to build out their own, ventures and startups. What tips, what recommendations would you give to people going on that journey?
Yeah, no problem at all. So, I mean, let's talk about unicorns. I think. The last time I checked, there have been about 50 unicorns created in the UK. So it's rare.
Yeah,
like it is rare.
Compared to the US, I mean.
And also, but in the UK, I think it's got more unicorns than kind of France, Germany combined, or something like that. So, we're reasonably good at it, but it's still incredibly rare. And if you really want to aim for that, then you can look at a company like Monzo. So it's obviously kind of heavily involved in that, and absolutely cannot take the credit for it. I joined it as the rocket ship was taking off, and then just tried to sort of keep control as we were sort of accelerating into space. But my view there is you can really examine those companies, and there is a playbook. There genuinely is a playbook, but even a lot of people at Monzo wouldn't be able to tell you what that playbook was. Tom Blomfield did a really helpful blog post about Monzo's growth and the route to 1 million customers, and really the million came about the same time as.
I've read it. It's a good blog.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, and it's interesting because it just lays it out, and it's quite factual. He doesn't say why necessarily or sort of principles. He just kind of says, look, these are the things that happened in the order as I kind of remember it. There is a great book by Andrew Chen called The Cold Start Problem, and he probably covers, maybe about 25 different unicorns, really, or companies that really made it and what the growth trajectory was. So, and he's great at just saying, okay, these are the principles. Like this is roughly the playbook, and then you can kind of read that stuff and sort of think, okay, is there a repeatable model here? What I think is much more likely to be the case is you've got to do the hard slog. And that, I don't mean that to be depressing. It just is the case that building a startup, for the most part, you won't be able to get the benefit of the thing which just really made whichever, what it is that you're looking at take off. So, in Monzo's case, it came along at this time when there's just this enormous anti-bank sentiment. We'd had the kind of financial crisis, and banks they were making too much money, and they didn't care about customers. They really didn't. And I'll happily say that, and I've always said that on stage several times.
People know that because they've experienced it firsthand. Mm-hmm. Everybody has. Everybody's banked with a traditional legacy monolith, and they know what the experience is like.
Absolutely. And so I often liken it to these lumbering elephants that are just sort of wandering along and just overfed. And you could, as a startup, and I built 3 companies that competed against the banks, just run in between their legs, and they had no idea what was going on. It's actually a pleasure. And so if you're playing into that, the idea of building a new bank, which just seemed enormously ambitious and came along at this time when the media really wanted to support this, and we had a lot of things going for us. We had this very cute dog that was the office dog that seemed to appear in like every news article, and it's a reasonably young team, and everyone's like, good grief, can they really do a bank? And it's the first banking license, or one of the only a handful of banking licenses that have been handed out in the last 100 years or so. Those are a lot of things that just aren't repeatable. But there are principles within there that you can then kind of take away. And when it comes down to it, it's the same stuff that you need to figure out if you're going to go on the hard slog journey. At the start, there is just this customer validation process, and it's unavoidable. And you've got to be able to just sort of break down the journey into these bite-sized chunks. The first bit is just customer validation, and you shouldn't worry about anything else. Do customers really have the problem that you think they have? Do you understand it well enough to think what solutions might be, even if you don't know what the solution is? So there's a great book on this. It's 4 Steps to the Epiphany by Steve Blank, and I read this far too late and then had to sort of revise what I've been focused on, because this was just absolutely brilliant. I don't actually recommend you read the whole thing. It's sort of a bit of an unwieldy beast, but you should read selected chapters from it. And the key principle is, what could you do creatively to go and find out if customers kind of care about this thing that doesn't involve you doing production level code? This is a really, really useful concept. It involves, you can be speaking to customers, you can be doing design prototypes, you can do lots of stuff that just doesn't cost any money, because your most expensive resource is your engineering capacity, and you just do not want people to be actually creating code. And so many people just kind of think, okay, this is a thing that we built. I had this really painful conversation with an entrepreneur the other day who'd sort of gone a long way down the line of sort of building this working website, and I was just like, oh, have you actually kind of tested that this is the right solution? And it was, I saw the pain on his face, but I was just so glad to at least be able to deliver the advice now, before he got any further with it. And he stuck like 60K of his savings into this thing. So this is the key principle at the start. Just get the customer validation bit going. Only then, when you're onto something, think about the solutions, and you need to find ways of rapid prototyping. And that's where it's more the kind of lean startup, minimum viable product stuff of like, okay, what are the quickest ways that you can get stuff into customers' hands where you can actually test out different solutions and different approaches? And that's really the kind of startup part that can be so difficult, because you're trying to get traction. And at this stage, it's good to, ideally, you get a little bit of funding to just kind of help accelerate things. And you need to prove if you can get this thing into people's hands, but you don't need to prove retention out. And then it's only when you're going from seed to Series A that you should be thinking about retention and revenue. Series A, really what people want to see is that you can make money. In some way, shape, or form. That wasn't actually the way for the last few years, but things have normalized now, and you need to be making money. That's the point where then retention matters, where revenue matters, and you shouldn't worry too much about that before. You just need to be able to tell a story about the things that you'll do. And so I feel like just breaking down the journey into these bite-sized chunks means that suddenly this really daunting thing of like, how on earth do I get this thing going, feels much, much more realistic and attainable.
Cool. All right. Product market fit, but not just doing that in a way that works, doing that in a way that catches a trend, doing that in a way that can scale with culture and getting an office dog. I have a dog, so I'm going to put in more of my marketing.
Yeah.
And then, I figured it out there.
I mean, we didn't talk about market, and there's a lovely blog on this, Paul Graham blog, just called Market Wins.
Okay. I love his essays are great.
Oh my goodness, yeah, absolutely amazing. And this is a classic. If you had sort of 2 minutes, you hadn't read that, I would just say stop whatever you're doing and just go and read it. And it just sort of explains, if you can ride a wave, and in the past I've been kind of fintech, just sort of riding these waves, it's just so much easier than trying to create the market or even go against a market that's sort of shifting in a different direction.
The wind's at your back, right?
Yeah, and then if you've got a good team, you can really exploit it.
You mentioned PG and Whattam. You mentioned Tom earlier, and he's obviously recently left London to go there. I was emailing with Tom actually last night about this, and he's joined as a partner, I believe, at
Y Combinator.
Yeah, and on his way out of the UK, and I do believe the media kind of unfairly positioned what he was saying, but he did in many ways fire a shot at the UK on his way out when he went to the Valley and said, like, we're not as supportive of, I suppose, the vision of trying to build a unicorn here, which I probably would agree with, to be honest. Would you share that sentiment that the UK, because you mentioned it's only been like 50 unicorns. I don't know what the numbers are in the Valley, but I mean, there are obviously a lot more.
Yeah.
Would you share his opinion that perhaps the UK needs to think a little bit more optimistically and put their money where that vision is when it comes to investment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on the Digital Economy Council, so we advise the government on their tech strategy, and I see how much they want to celebrate unicorns, and in fact, I think they're running a campaign at the moment called Unicorn Kingdom, which is up to you if you kind of like the term or not. But the trickiest thing, I think, is just really acknowledging all the different elements that you need to create a unicorn, and it's ecosystem based. So every part of the ecosystem has to play its role, and have this level of ambition that I don't see in a lot of people that I speak with. So it's not just, you need founders that are confident enough that they will just go for it, that they will swing for the fences. And in order to if you look at these companies that really, really scale fast, they have gone all in. When they see something that's working, they go all in. And it's a very un-British thing. It just culturally is an un-British thing. We're more about hedging and just, don't put all your eggs in one basket and so on. It's like, well, no, actually, for these things that really, really take off, you go completely for it. There was a point for Monzo. There's been 2 points in Monzo's life where it nearly went bust. But one of them, because we were just absolutely all in, even on a thing that sort of wasn't working. We were losing money hand over fist when we were using the prepaid infrastructure. We happened to pay lots of third parties. Nearly went bust as a result, but we just didn't want to in any way kind of constrain the growth. And that's because we had this mentality that we were going to make it and we were just going for it and going big. So there's this kind of founder mentality that's almost missing, and that founder mentality has to be sort of pervasive across the whole team. And then you need all the people around to support it. So you need investors that go, yep, all in on this. And venture cap, pretty good for this. They really want stuff where they kind of only need a couple of companies in their portfolio, let's say 20, to really return the fund. So they like these kind of really big sort of 100x plays. So
that's what they're looking for at the end.
Yeah,
right?
So they're pretty good, and that can be problematic in other ways, because actually if you've got a thing that's heading for more of a 10x, then they get a bit more nervous, which is a shame because it's still a good business. But so you've got to get the kind of folks around there from the investment, and then you've got to actually have the sort of state and regulators and so on supportive of this. So I've got a real kind of, I don't know how to say it. It's basically, I feel like in financial services, it's incredibly difficult because the regulator needs to do its job of protecting customers, but also allow companies to be in this very kind of, I guess, free environment to be able to innovate. And innovate means it's a thing they haven't seen before. And that's tough for a regulator. Regulators just kind of like, oh, can you not just do things exactly as Barclays or Lloyd's
That's why
do
blockchain
things?
is so hard to, because
Blockchain's a nightmare.
Yeah, like how do you regulate something that's brand new?
And I was in a room where some of these decisions were being discussed at government level, and I kind of said, look, the best approach has to be to see. We were talking about AI. The best approach has to be to sort of see how this gets used. And so I was in a room where we were discussing AI actually at government level and how to regulate that. And the interesting thing there was, or my view on this was, actually, you need to let this play out and then be incredibly quick to see how it gets applied. And if it gets applied in the applications which are not good, you jump on that really quickly. Now, that's the opposite of the way that regulation normally works, the way that government normally works. And I could see those kind of nervousness on people's faces. But I don't see any other way unless you then make it sort of almost anti-competitive to be building this stuff in the UK.